players since we are now loaded in. In the top right position, playing as the blue Zerg. He got to this second round by taking out Dignitas's Dream. He plays for Team Liquid. It is RET. Now, in the top left, we do have the red Protoss player who just had an epic battle of a series against Todd. We do have Crank.
Now, I'm going to get this out of the way first and foremost at the beginning of the game. This map, purely by design, I think it is Protoss favored. Not necessarily because any of the architecture on the map is, oh my god, Protoss can use this so well, but simply because it actually looks like they're playing on a giant mothership. Whereas, if you take a look at the Zerg half of the map, all he's doing is gunk it up with creep. That's like walking into someone's house and then not taking your shoes off and getting mud everywhere all over the carpet. It's a little bit rude, man.
Now, I don't want to excite anyone, but the chat has just dropped a 12-month ESET antivirus key, so go, 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 go. But yes, the map choice is very interesting because the biggest thing for me personally is actually just the third base for a Zerg can be a little bit difficult to take. But in their spawn positions, it just means that it should be the lower base, the one out in the middle of nowhere. And that can be just slightly awkward. It's not as bad as if they're in the vertical spawn positions, though. That's when things get really funky. So we'll wait to see what Red's going to do. But for the moment, it looks like a Forge Fast expansion out of Crank and a hatch first out of RET.
All right then. Well, managing to get into a situation where, oh dear, and it looks like Crank has actually walled a probe off so that he can get a cannon down at the natural and attempt to deny this hatchery. This is one of the reasons why Zergs go pool first before the hatch, and it looks like we're about to discover firsthand what Crank wants to do to punish it. And here we go. A lot of drones being pulled from RET down to the natural expansion now, and the probe weaseling his way out there, and two cannons go down simultaneously. RET's going to have a lot of trouble here trying to get those down before the cannons go up.
Now, I guess you could say the Crank was a bit cranky about this hatchery coming down because I saw that pump from the chat. I can't take any credit for that. But, of course, this is why you don't hatch first against a Protoss player, because just because you're up against someone who is as well known and seen to be a just a good player like Crank doesn't mean they're not going to be happy to cannon rush you. I would happily cannon rush someone for a chance to get a part of the prize. Wouldn't you?
No, I completely agree. And I'm surprised RET stayed attacking those pylons so long. At the end of the day, I think we all knew that he wasn't going to get there quite in time, so he should have pulled the drones back and kept mining with them a little longer. But that's a minor detail at this point in the game. He's got some links popping out. Going to try and head over to the natural expansion of Crank to see if he can't deny this Nexus going down. The problem is the cannon's already up, and he's going to effectively complete the wall off with a gateway now. So really not much room for maneuver here. And now that this hatchery is going down, RET's finding himself in a little bit of a difficult position, to say the least.
This is, I'm going to say it, beyond a difficult position. As a Zerg player, losing a quick expansion doesn't just hurt your economy. It's halved RET's production capability. RET is just got on one hatch's worth of lava, and as such could be in big problems. And Crank even putting down that pylon at the potential third base, stopping RET from expanding there. So RET's only option to expand right now is by dealing with those cannons or the pylon blocking his third.
Yeah, I don't really think that hiding a hatchery is something that Zergs like to do at this point in the game, because Crank is setting himself up very, very well to possibly follow this up with a kind of two-base timing. RET on 31 supply versus 29 at the moment. The worker supply is 25 versus 27 for Crank. The problem is Crank is producing out of two Nexi as of this very moment.
Now, there are different options open to Crank. Now, the two-base play you mentioned is something that would be very viable. I'm also interested to see whether Crank decides to go for something a bit more unusual, like maybe he could go and try and punish the fact that RET may go for a lot of roaches with, say, an Oracle. That could be a great move in itself. Maybe he will just go for, well, a straight-up big gateway push, hoping the RET doesn't have the production or the income to make enough units to defend it.
Well, also I should point out here that we've already seen in our first best of 3 of the day a situation where we were looking at the game and about 80% of everyone watching, including quite a lot of my own mind, is looking at it going, well, this is GG. And then about 2 minutes later, we went, well, hold on a second, this is Heart of the Swarm, and it's most definitely not. So don't count Red out of this just yet, of course. The dynamic in this game, very different to how it used to be. And I'm really eager to see if Crank follows this up with what a lot of people might consider a ridiculously powerful push, and if Ret can find a really good way to defend against it.
So what Ret has got coming out is basically his second hatchery is only just about to finish up. That is such a huge disadvantage for Ret. If we look at the worker count, it is 37 apiece, but the army tab is in Crank's favor. We've also got the fact that Crank is going to start ramping up his production massively very, very soon. He's queuing up some gateways to be produced. He's also got the +1 weapons on its way, and I'm really suspecting just a lot of gateway unit pressure.
Yeah, Crank is doing what frankly is just the sensible thing right now. Oh, I like the placement of Ret's creep troopers on the cliff, by the way, just making a very small path for those drones to go towards a third base location. Really cool stuff there. But Crank's doing something very sensible. He's saying, right, I know how much damage I've done. I know it's really going to cripple your economy. So what I'm going to do is just turtle up and get a lot of unit production structures. There's nothing Ret can do against that. Sure, Crank's not killing him right now, but there's nothing Ret can do against Crank either, and Crank's going to feel very, very comfortable.
Ultimately, it comes down to the fact that Crank has been on equal workers and a base up for a long period of this game, and in the early game as well, where it's possibly the most sizable advantage you can get. And now, with the robotics facility coming down, with the Twilight Council coming down, this could easily be some kind of blink play he's going for. He could just be going for all-out mass production, or should he want to, he could just try and take this to the late game, thinking that actually, if I turtle up and just play solidly, you won't be able to keep up with my macro.
This chat is actually pretty awesome. I just saw someone type the background of the map is tripping him out, and now I almost can't stop scrolling around. I'm gonna have to like refocus and try and do my job again, but it's he actually makes a very legit point. It's very mesmerizing watching the stars go by.
It's even worse when you're on the observer cam and the observer starts trying to rotate on it, which our lovely one just did, and my head just started spinning. I had to like put my feet down on the floor, touch the desk, and be like, yes, I'm still stationary just.
A lot of zealots being warped in though at those pylons that were next to the cannons early, and Crank is going to be moving up straight into the main base of Ret here. There are 8 zealots with 2. Look at this, 2 staying at the ramp to try and wall off against Zergling. 6 are going to wreak havoc in the mineral line. This is a fantastic little play here from Crank. Ret is trying to go Zergling Hydra at the moment. How much damage will these get done? The Spine Crawler goes down in the mineral line. These zealots are on hold position. Number of workers killed at the moment, 6 and counting.
Now, a good player would have warped in those zealots and run them into the main. A great player leaves 2 to wall off to prevent the speedlings from coming to defend. Crank really showing that he is on top form today. He's taking his third base, which is just completed. He's getting up his robotics bay. Colossi are coming out. Blink is nearly finished. And just generally speaking, Crank is getting further and further ahead in every way he could possibly want.
Yeah, Crank is doing very, very well in this game, and obviously Ret, realizing that was quite frustrating, opted to take out those pylons and cannons once and for all. He will have the advantage that the 4th base he takes is his natural, which means that he hasn't been mining from there, so the minerals there will last a bit longer. It's a question of whether the game is going to last that long. He has some Hydras and some Lings out at the moment, but only +1 attack on the Hydras at the moment. No other upgrades. Meanwhile, Crank is +2 already complete, and a reasonably fearsome army that's actually slightly larger after his first warp in as well.
Now, we see the Ret is going for that infestation pit, and I can't help but hope he goes for swarm hosts. Let me explain why. Ret has been behind economically this game. He has lost an awful lot of resources, and as a result, you have to be cost effective, and therefore, swarm hosts are the most cost effective option you could hope to get. And now, as we see, Ret getting them out. So I think that is a solid choice.
All right, so we're going to see Swarm Host Hydra Ling, And the Hydras, by the way, have got both their range and their speed upgrade from Ret, so he hasn't forgotten those upgrades. And of course, that makes them a very, very potent unit in Heart of the Swarm indeed. Crank is not going to be able just to waltz in and take these lightly. Ret, a little bit supply blocked at the moment, though, on 118, and Crank actually matching him for supply. So let's take a quick look at the army quality right now. The Mothership Core is out for Crank, and it's at full energy. That's fantastic news. He's got 11 Stalkers, 4 Sentries, and a Colossus out. Probably wants more than just one in the long run. Meanwhile, Ret, he's got 12 Hydralisks, 17 Zerglings, and 4 Swarmhosts with an additional 1 or 2 on the way. But neither player really has any sort of crushing army that's making me think, oh god, this is the push that's going to end the game just yet.
Ret, he's building up to, though, those Swarm Hosts, once they get up into a sizable number, usually around the 10 mark, they become nigh on unstoppable, apart from Colossi. And what Ret is doing, he's getting up the Spire, which will let him get Corruptors, and then you get into the late game composition of Corruptor, Swarm Host. That is so difficult to deal with. The best way to deal with that I found so far is actually just to get an Observer out and Tempest, because a ground force will not trade effectively against that. And as such, if Ret is able to get that out, Crank could be in a lot of problems.
No, that's a really good point, actually. If Crank continues to allow Ret to just mass up these Swarmhosts, and there they go, they're being burrowed right now with Locust moving out towards the middle of the map. So obviously he saw that there were units moving towards the Watchtower, and he's saying, you know what, I'm having absolutely none of that, and everything is going to get pushed back just a little bit. Although amusingly, everything dies as soon as it gets to the Watchtower, and that one Stalker was frightened away for no reason.
That poor Stalker, he's just a cautious man in life. He was like, no, do you know what? It's not worth the risk. I'm not holding this Watchtower. I quit. And these Locusts, well, they're moving forward. The creep spread, obviously going to be helpful, but what Ret's doing is starting to just show that actually I'm still in this game. You haven't won this yet.
Yeah, he's like, that Stalker's like the little kid that went home and cried wolf. There are locusts everywhere! And then sort of other units sort of pop by and take a look. They're like, what are you talking about? I see a little pool of blood, but that's about it. So that threat is going to become a lot more real, though, as Ret decides to push his Swarmhost out across the map. That was a really nice push towards the tower, and Crank now is going to have to think of an alternative to try and power through this ground army from Ret. We've seen some Protosses go Sky Toss and get a lot of Tempests, for example, to snipe them off from afar, but Crank's already at 194 supply. That's not really an option for him right now.
He's getting the Templar Archives out, so he's going to be going High Templar, and that's great in the sense that you can storm on the Locusts, which will take them out very effectively. The downside is, though, storms are finite. You only have so many you can throw down before the energy runs out, and that's the point where the Swarm Hosts become very, very strong. And ultimately, Ret can throw as many Locusts as Crank as he so pleases, because they are just going to keep on coming for absolutely free. The Corruptors, that's the real issue for Crank, because the Colossi are going to be at a lot of risk.
And here we go, the Colossi showing that despite having that many numbers, those Locusts really didn't die that quickly, did they, Maddles? So Crank has to be very, very wary. Oop, a Swarmhost getting caught out of position, but the rest of them successfully burrowing, and it looks like this is going to be the engagement.
Indeed, it does. The Corruptors are doing some nice damage to those Colossi. The Swarm Hosts are just not dying quickly enough, but the Stalkers all focusing down the Corruptors and do manage to kill them.
Oh, and is there the Observer out? No, there's no Observer on top of this army just yet. No, wait, never mind. There goes the Vision, and the Swarm Hosts are getting completely annihilated. There were at least 6 of them that went... Wait, were those the Locusts that went down there? So there isn't actually an Observer on top of this army. Crank's just going to march straight past them.
This is incredible. Crank has dealt with this so well, and Ret forced to GG.